Let's start in where we left off. I think last time we were doing sign up and we got to the point where we set up the screen, we set up the data resource, we pretty much had everything running, and we even got the auth token back, which was our identification that we were able to get to the data or get signed in. So I'm going to get things set up here, and we are going to focus on, let's say, a few minutes of cleanup on the screen that I left you with. It was a little bit haphazard, and then focus on login, as you can see here. And the goal will be we get back to our to-do list. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. We are going to start with the AppGyver mobile app aspect of this. Maybe do a little bit of cleanup because I realized that my failure message is showing JSON instead of a message. And maybe we can come up with an image. I did a little looking ahead of this video and clean up this main screen a little bit. So let's see, so I know what time it is. Let's see if we can keep some of the cleanup to around 5 minutes, and then we'll do the login real quick. So we are going to upload an image. I may already have it uploaded. I do. We're going to use this image, and I'm going to do some resizing of it. We're going to move somewhat quickly through this, but if you notice, we're in the sign up page, and this was the top image section that we had. I'm going to go ahead and change dimensions and position. Let's say that we make this 150 pixels. There we go. Save that. And then let's go ahead and align itself to the center. There we go. Maybe even put a little bit of, it's set to, what is it set to here? Space or base, but I think we want a little more space than that. Let's just put in 32. That gives us a little space between the image and our data entry section. So that looks pretty decent, except now the blue doesn't look that good. I don't know if you guys have used a tool like this, but on my Chrome browser, I have a color picker tool. So it'll create these crosshairs. And if I hover over and click on it, then I can just copy and paste, and we can actually come into the sign up and change this background color. But maybe this is a good time to spend a minute on the theme, because we see that color informative is the theme variable that's being used. As opposed to changing it on just one button, I am going to go ahead and go into the theme section and find color informative. Here it is. So if I change this value to what I just did the color picker on, see, we've got that green. And then I go back to my sign up screen. Let's see if, looky there. So now I've just made the green of anything using color informative. So any button that I drag onto the screen will now match the green of this free vector logo that I found out on the internet. So for what it's worth, there's a little bit of theme fun. Sometimes you'll find yourself just changing the value hard-coded here. I would recommend, and this is a reminder to myself as well, that if you can go in and change the theme variable, you'll save yourself a lot of headaches going forward because everything will be taken care of for you. Okay, so we've got our logo in here, makes it look a little nicer. We've changed the color to match. I had mentioned that my toast message was invalid. Let's see here. Why don't I show you what I mean before I make the changes so that you can see that. Here we are back in the app. I'm going to select create new account. And if I think I have a TA1@email set up for an account. Let's see if we can pull this off. There we go. See that JSON there? It says it's already in use, but what we really want is just the message, as you can imagine. So we're going to come into our toast. We're going to go back, and we're going to do a little bit of change here. We're going to use a formula because we need to dig a little bit into that JSON. So this is what was originally there for an error message. let me just see, there we go. I got rid of the tail end of the text so that AppGyver would show me all my options. And I think we want to go with the raw error, but the key to that is we also want to be able to pick the message, because that was the JSON key out of that. So we want lookup. There we go. Oh, and I just got rid of my object stuff, but we can fix that because we know it was output of another node, and we know it was raw error. There we go. So now it inserted for me output, create record, raw error. And here I just need to put the key that we saw. And it came up and went pretty quick, but I think what we have is message. So now I have a formula that will take the raw error out of the output from a prior node, the create record, which is our sign-in, and it will look up the message key and give us that text back for what that was. So if I go ahead now and go back into the app, and I create new account, we do the TA1 that we know already exists. Let's sign up, there we go. The account is already in use, that's much nicer. Okay, so we've got a logo, we've got a little bit of a color scheme starting, and we've got the ability to have messages that look decent. So let's call that good for our cleanup from our last efforts. And now let's go back to the login effort. So we know that coming out of create record, when we successfully create a record, we're going to dismiss the initial view, which will then take us to the to-do list. But the one thing that I realized after I ended the video last time is that would be successful way too often, because within the to-do, I still have a hard-coded bearer token. And obviously you don't want to have that long-term. So we are going to get rid of that bearer token. And what we're going to need to do is set a variable in the data variable that passes in this authorization value, which is the auth token. So I now have my data resource for the to-do set up so that it won't automatically log me in around security. So let's go ahead and go back to our screens. Let me look at one thing here. This is set to static. Actually, I should show you this too. So I'm getting distracted, but if you create a property, in this case, an HTTP header, and you leave it as static, normally this should show up in your data variable on the screen. So let's go show you what I learned the hard way. That if we are in our to-do list and we go to variables and we click on data variable and to-do one, there is no authorization header here. So I have no way of associating that authorization header. And for a few minutes earlier, I was confused on why I did not see that. So pay attention to what you see here under the collection, single and new, and then its filter. I'm going to go back into data to do. We're in the base, authorization. What I discovered is I can't have it as static, obviously, because static means that we're going to have a value set here and not allow it to be set anywhere else. So when I save that change, having turned off static, and I go back to the screen I was on, there's my authorization header. Yay. Pretty simple, but it confused me for a little while, so I thought I would share. Now, what we can do is we want to pass in an authorization token that we got off of the sign up. So I'm going to look at the app variables because we had created an auth token variable right here, and I need to set that to the authorization here. So let's go data and variables. I clicked on authorization. We're going to pick data and variables. We're going to pick an app variable, and we're going to choose auth token. So when we fill in auth token, we're going to be passing that back to Xano. And in good fashion, I need to do it a little bit differently because I don't know if you remember, but I just did. We're not going to be able to just pass in auth token because what HTTP expects is that we've specified bearer space in front of that auth token. So instead of just doing the variable, I went back into formula, used the variable we had, but concatenated bearer space onto the front of it. So now when we get that authorization token back, we should have it set up correctly so our to-do list will work. Okay, so that's on our list page. We were messing around with the data variable. We've got the auth token set up for it, which means we're going to go do our login. So for the login, and our button is blue because it's part of our theme, or blue, green as opposed to blue because we have set our theme to make all buttons green. So when I click on login, this is the default information that AppGyver put in place when we originally turned on the auth value on this main menu here. But it doesn't do anything other than tell us we're logging in with credentials and setting a variable, but it doesn't actually do a login for us. So I'm going to delete those. We will want the dismiss initial view when we've successfully logged in. So what I need to do is go back to Xano, and I need to prove, here we go, am I in the right app? Let's make sure I am. I need to make sure that the login works. And you know, I'm probably not going to remember the password I used when I signed up, so I'm going to create a new account through the run and debug of the sign up. And this will be test account 2 ta2@email.com. And just to keep it simple, password 1. So everybody can help me remember that here. We're going to go ahead and run it. We have an auth token. Probably don't actually need to save it, but just in case, I'll copy that. Now let's go back and test our login and see what happens. The login should give us a new auth token as well, as you can see down at the bottom in the response. So the first thing we're going to do is run and debug to make sure that it works here, because there's really no reason to try it in AppGyver if we can't get it to work in Xano. There we go. So there we got an auth token successfully, a new one. I would assume it's a new one at least. And then we're going to purposely break it. Okay, and run. There we go. So we know that it's working. It's letting us in with the right password, and it's not letting us in with the wrong password. So those are good things. Okay. So now let's take, I guess, a minute. I usually describe what we've got going on here. What we do on a login with email and password is get a record from user. So based on the field name of email for what is the user table, we're going to get a record from user. The field name we're going to look for is email, and we're going to compare it to a value of input email that we received up over here. So then we're going to check password, and check password is one of those utility functions. In a prior video, I showed you where you can get those. I can show you real quick here. It's a plus sign off the function stack, utility functions, check password. So that's where that came from. And what it is going to do when we click on that is the input text of password is going to be compared against the hash password, and the result, whether it matches or not, because that's what we're doing is checking the password. If it matches, we're going to have a true/false come out of the result, the pass result. So the precondition here, so if this is met, we're good. If not, it fails. So in other words, if the password doesn't match, then it'll return an invalid credentials error message right here and say that access is denied. And if it does work, the only way you get to the create authentication is if the precondition worked. And so create authentication creates a token again. And you've seen, we've gone through what's involved with that. it's another one of those utility functions that we just looked at. And so we'll set the auth token as we saw, put it in a variable, and return it to the calling app. So that's everything that's happening with login. Once again, the beautiful thing about Xano is I didn't have to figure out how to do these authentication functions. When I created my new workspace and they created email login for me, they gave me all this capability as just a starting point. So it makes things very easy. Okay, so all that being said, we know we're going to need this endpoint URL. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab that right now, and we're going to head back to AppGyver and go to the data. We've already got the sign up, but now I need a login direct integration API. So let's create that. User login. And since I have that endpoint, we're good there. We'll save it. Okay. So now what we want to do is, let me look at something here. This is what I keep meaning to point out. So for the auth login, that is a post request, as opposed to a get where I get an item or get a list. It's a post, which means I want to use what AppGyver considers a create record. And really, it's just saying it is a post. Most of the time, a post means you're creating a record, but in login, you have an exception, which is no big deal. Once again, we have to pay attention to the empty screen and turn the post on. And then what we want to do is define our schema. So for any post that I'm doing that has the concept of creating or passing data, I'm going to come into the schema tab first. And instead of using get schema, I'm going to create a custom schema. And you've seen me do this before, but we're going to do it for login this time. And it's going to be email for the key. Title will be email. It is text. Okay, don't save yet, otherwise it moves where I'm at. And then we want password. Title is password. Okay, so now if we look at our custom object now, we'll have those set. ta2@email.com. Password 1. We'll save that and we'll give this run a try. See if we get an auth token back. And we do. Okay, so once again, from our data up approach, we've proven that everything works in Xano. We've stepped it into AppGyver and set it up, ran it here, proved that it worked here. We are going to set our schema from response, as we always do. And at this point, I now have my mobile app connecting into the login capabilities of Xano. So let's head back to our login screen. Things should be pretty straightforward from here. Now I have a credentials variable. You can see it's a page variable. It's credentials.username, and the same page variable credentials object and password. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to tie that into the login. So for that, we are going to pick the post or create record. And we are going to not use sign up. We're going to come over here and pick the login. And then we are going to pick that data variable, credentials, incompatible, object with 2 properties. Okay, I need to probably take a moment here while we're looking at this and figure out what about credentials doesn't match password username to what I just created. So I'm going to take a second without pausing and see if it will become obvious to me, heading back to data and log in and create record post in the schema. I have email and password. That seems right. The method is enabled. I was able to test email and password. Those are just the labels. So if I come back into the screen of login and create record, I've picked login for the data variable and the resource. And then what I wanted to do, does this custom, oh, there we go, that's my problem. I have an obsolete one here. So since it defaulted to sign in the resource name, it also defaulted to the sign in record properties. And I hadn't seen this before. It's hung on to the definition of the sign in, except that it tries to change because it saw I did login and it marks this as obsolete. If you're trying to figure out how to delete this, what you do is pick the no value option and it magically goes away. You'll run into that on occasion. I forget every time I come back into it, and that's what the problem was. So we're going to go back in and associate the record properties of the page variable, and it didn't matter. Isn't that beautiful? Okay. If I don't fix this in short order, I'll do a quick pause, find it, and then tell you so you don't have to suffer through me debugging in real time here. Data and variables. I mean, my other option is I just use a formula, but I'm kind of expecting that this should work, but it's not gonna. The type object with two properties is not assignable to the object with two properties. Interesting. Okay, so you know what I'm gonna do instead of debug? I'm gonna live on the edge, and we are going to go to formula. No, we're not. We're gonna try to make this work for you guys. So you give me a moment, I'm gonna pause. We're gonna come right back with a working approach. And it ends up being more obvious than you expect, doesn't it? Some of you may have even noticed when I didn't and might have been yelling at me on what the difference was. So since this login screen and its page variable was created by AppGyver when we did the authentication page, what I forgot to do, since my API is waiting for email and password, the credentials are username and password. So what I need to do, simplest of things, is to go into the page variable and change username to be email so that it matches what my API expects. Okay, so let's now look at login, create record. Here's where I was running into the problems, but now we're going to go to page variable, credentials, and boom, all's happy. So all it was is the name of the properties and the number of the properties need to match what you're trying to associate it with. So at this point, we have a login that's using, it's interesting, it stayed. Let me take a look here. It still says username here, but that may be more an artifact of it just not changing, because I obviously, yeah, I have it changed here, so we're good. We're going to ignore that for now. So we're going to do the login, create record. We've got the credentials associated. If we are successful with a login, we are going to want to set the app variable. So we are going to go back up to set app variable. So if you remember when we did the API, it sends us an auth token. And we have a variable name here that's an app variable. It already knows that it needs to do an app variable, and that's the only one we have is auth token. The reason it knows it is that's the flow function we're using. So what I'm going to assign to that app variable is output from another node, the create record, the auth token. Okay. So that means I now have an app variable, and if you remember earlier, we associated that app variable of auth token to the to-do list authorization. So also, we're dealing with outputs as a reminder. So this top little nubbin here is the good response, and the second one is the error. So the good response is going into set app variable, because I know I've logged in, and then I'm going to dismiss the initial view, and I should see a to-do list when I do that. Just in case something goes wrong, let's put in our toast. And let's go back to properties. And let's just say login failed. For now, we'll just do that. we can hook it up to what the failure message is coming back from the back end, but I'm going to be a little bit lazy at the moment. Maybe that'll give me something to clean up later. Okay, so I think we might have a login working. Feel like I'm forgetting something again, but the easiest way to find out is to come back over and reconnect to the mobile and see if we can't get a login to work. There we go, it's popping up. Okay. So we're going to go into AppGyver, the emulator, and if I do TA1, or did I do TA2? I think I did TA2. I really need people to be able to help me remember stuff, don't I? We're going to find out what I did. And then I believe it was password 1, really secure. Okay, and I'm going to, just in case I mess something up, copy that so it's easy. Okay, so login failed. TA2@email.com and password 1 was not happy. TA2 email, let's go over to Xano and let's just see what we have going on. I have TA2@email.com, that looks good. And then if I go into the APIs again and do a login, and let's go ahead and do a run and debug and just see what I have going on here. What it may be is in AppGyver, I may have everything up correctly to get it to pass through. Okay, so it is password 1. So I know I'm using the right data, which means I've got a problem over here when I'm doing my login. So I've got a set app variable, let's see, create record, login, right? So let's do a little bit of debugging here. I'm going to drop an alert on the screen, and that'll sit between us and doing the app variable. And we're just going to say login credentials and go into the optional inputs, and we are going to pick the data variable. We want the page, credentials, and we'll just take the whole credentials object and see what happens. I'll try to keep a pattern here of doing a little bit of debugging with you guys, just so you can kind of learn how mistakes happen and how to kind of figure out how to get away from them. But then if it takes too long, I will pause and come back with an answer like I did last time. Okay. Well, yeah, silly me. Sometimes we connect the wrong thing. Really, it makes no sense to attach it to the working output when it's the fail output that we're dealing with. There we go. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so when it fails, I'll get my alert, and we'll go from there. So I have my email in the clipboard for this very reason. That all looks correct. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll come back and let you know what second goofy thing I did. And I think I actually figured this one out in short order as well. If you remember, I think this is a cascading issue. Originally, I had changed the variable for credentials to be email from username, because email is what we need for the API. And username was the default setup that we got for authentication with AppGyver, which is no big deal. It's easy to change. But after I changed that, and we go back to the views, you may remember I said, oh, look, it still says username. Maybe that's just a fluke. Well, I don't know that it is, because when you look here, when I attempted to log in and I have my alert showing up, it still says username. So I think what I need to do, and I haven't done it yet because I can't undo the broken to show you, is I'm going to go back in to this one And you notice here it still says username. This is not valid, obviously. So what we're going to do is just simply do that, pick email. We see it change here. I'm going to save it, and we are going to try to log in again. This should refresh itself. Did I save everything? I did. Let's hope that good comes from this. Password 1. Looky there. That's a bit of a struggle. I didn't take the easy path to get to that. But what we have at this point is you cannot get to the to-do list without going through normal mobile app sign up and then login. So we'll probably do the same thing on the next video. Same thing, meaning I might start with a little bit of cleanup on the login, maybe use the logo there and do some nice spacing and kind of fix things up a little bit. And then I think what we'll do on the next video, and I appreciate you guys hanging with me on this one if you were able to, as in the amount of time it took. But on the next one, when you do your login, I'm going to set it up so that that auth token is saved to local storage, so that when you come back into the app, if that local storage has a valid auth token, you'll get automatically taken in past the login screen to your list without having to log in again, which is a nice convenience. Almost every mobile app has it, and we are going to add it to ours. So again, thanks for hanging with me. If you've got questions, let me know.